Influence of regenerative pesticides from circadian crop sciences on quality of Cabernet Sauvignon grapes and the resultant wine. Vacaville, California, 2023 season. If you follow the red arrow, you'll see where the vineyard is located, which is about halfway between Vacaville and Winters. And then if you look to the west, which would be to the left of the map, you'll find Highway 29, which goes up through the Napa Valley. Even though it's not distance-wise, it's not that far from Napa. The environment here is very different. It's much hotter. It's shielded by the nearby mountain ridge from a lot of the delta cooling effects. It's morning at the vineyard here, and they've been growing Cabernet Sauvignon and Petit Syrah wine grapes since 2002. According to the owner, no pesticides have been used at the vineyard for the previous 12 years, and that includes sulfur, which seems pretty remarkable because you would think they would at least have some worry about powdery mildew, but he says it's so warm and dry that it's not really a concern. These are the regenerative pesticides to be used in the study, and the circadian sunrise, prolifics, and long shadow all contain antioxidants, and the biostimulant tricontinol, which is primarily derived from crude corn oil. The all phase, it's potassium sorbate is the active ingredient, which is a world-class, or it's one of the most commonly used food preservatives in the world, and it is well known to have a very broad spectrum of controlling fungi and bacteria. In the scientific literature, there's a lot of support for controlling certain plant diseases. We've had this product in field trials, and it's done very well at a real low cost per acre that can even be competitive with sulfur. It is combined with the biostimulant and natural plant polymer carrageenan. All-phase, in addition to the potassium sorbate, it contains carrageenan, which is derived from a sea algae, and is a natural polymer that's used as a food additive in ice cream and other things. But for our purposes, it dries to an invisible film enveloping target organisms and leaf surfaces, and that film is infused with the potassium sorbate, so it helps it be that much more effective. The carrageenan in itself is a biostimulant. It's known to increase a plant's natural defense system and to improve growth by increasing biomass production. In this study, potassium sorbate was sprayed on the foliage of tomato seedlings, and it inhibited the root diseases that they then exposed the plants to. So it's really interesting because that means that the potassium sorbate moved from the foliage down through the stem into the roots, and inhibited those diseases. From a standpoint of grapes, it's kind of interesting that this occurs because, say, with this all-phase product, if you were to be spraying for powdery mildew control on the foliage, you're likely getting potassium sorbate into the main trunks and down into the root zone. And in the process of moving through the plant that way, it would likely come into contact with microorganisms that are responsible for trunk diseases. And since potassium sorbate is very broad spectrum, and there's a very good chance it could inhibit some of these trunk diseases. We're not going to find that out in this study, but it's just something to keep in mind. Tricontinol. Tricontinol is a waxy substance produced by plants for the benefit of plants. It was patented by Michigan State University back in the 1970s as what may be the first plant biostimulant patent. This is our patent, and it's for the use of crude corn oil for reducing phytotoxicity of pesticides in plant washes and for enhancing overall plant health. Some of the products that we have bearing it with it are the Circadian Sunrise, Long Shadow, and Prolifics. If you want to learn more about tricontinol, I highly recommend that you read this article. This is a table from that article, and it shows a number of different crops and how tricontinol in published scientific studies has improved those crops. But what about tricontinol's effect on wine grapes? We're lucky. Just within the last year, this study came out, and it's was done over 2 years in Italy, evaluating the effect of tricontinol on the quality of wine grapes. Their conclusion, the veraison stage was shortened 4 days in 2020, whilst 2 days in 2021. The ripening of the tricontinol treated grapes was brought forward by 17 days in 2020 and by 9 days in 2021 in respect to the non-treated. And the TRIA application positively influenced the soluble sugar and kept the pH and tartaric acid at standard levels, along with more marked citric acid in the tricontinol treated. They also saw it promoted the microbial community living on the berry's skin. This vineyard does have some health issues. It appears to have some Esca disease and Pierce's disease. There's a lot of leaf hoppers. There's trunk diseases. There's, vines that are flat out dead and dying. One concern is the Pierce's disease and how it can be mechanically spread, by clipping, pruning, and by even root grafts. So, it could be vines that seem healthy have the Pierce's disease to some degree. And so we don't know how that's going to influence the experiment, if at all, but it's just out there. This is the control group you see here, the fruit of the control group. And these pictures were taken on the 25th of August. And I suspect we'll be harvesting these grapes within the next couple of weeks. These are Circadian Sunrise treated grapes, and especially when you're in the field, you can tell that they're blacker than the control group. Here you can see the berries of the Circadian Sunrise treated group off to the left, with the control group off to the right. the control group appears much bluer, and the circadian sunrise group is much blacker, and it's even more evident out in the field. Here's the circadian sunrise treated off to the left, and the control group off to the right, a little closer up, and it's apparent that they're different. Here is the long shadow treated group. And here is the long shadow treated group side by side with the control group. And the long shadow group appears darker and less blue than the control group as well. And, for the most part, there wasn't the uneven ripening, but one of those berries or bunches is pretty uneven. Here is the all phase treated group, and you can see that the berries don't have that bluish hue that the control group had either. Looking at the two groups side by side, does seem to be a little bit of a bluish hue to the all phase. In the field, they did seem noticeably darker, but not quite as dark as the tricontinol treatments with the circadian sunrise, long shadow, and prolifics. And here is the prolifics treated group. And here is the prolifics treated group side by side with the control. As you can see, the berries are much blacker than the control group. I would say the circadian sunrise and the prolifics, pretty similar in how black the fruit are. We're the blackest of the treatments. And on the 25th of August, we took some Brix readings, and we didn't really see huge differences, but this is what they are. Here you can see the berries side by side of the various treatments. You can see what the sugar concentration is on the 23rd and 25th of August. In this picture, the color didn't turn out quite as obvious. The difference, the skin in real life seemed to be thinner with the control, but it's pretty subjective at this point. I think when we finally make up the wine, we'll see a difference, but until then, we just don't know. Stay tuned, we'll be making wine soon. And if you know someone that's a professional winemaker, or you are a professional winemaker, you can have them or you contact us for samples. These samples won't be aged, but will be after the final malic acid fermentation. And if there's any problem, you should be able to detect it at that point. The rest is going to get aged, and we'll see how that turns out as well.